Shanghai's terrifying solution to stop COVID. Lockdowns spread across a quarter of China. And you won't believe what the Communist Party is doing now. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Shelley Zhang, filling in for Chris Chappell, who is practicing Kung Fu in the mountains. Things are still bad in Shanghai. A few days ago, we published a video looking at whether the Chinese Communist Party's COVID lockdowns could lead to the CCP's downfall. And I talked specifically about how authorities in Shanghai are enforcing China's dynamic zero COVID policy. Not by actually having zero cases, but by sending everyone with COVID to quarantine camps. That way they can claim there aren't any more COVID cases in the community because people who get infected in quarantine camps don't count. Busloads of people, including babies and the elderly, are being sent to quarantine camps at night. On social media, a woman named Zhi Ye documented the case of her 92-year-old grandmother and her 74-year-old uncle. Authorities broke down their door at 2 a.m. to take them to a quarantine camp 5 days after they tested positive. Her grandma refused to go to the camp because they had both tested negative several times since then. So they pulled her out of bed and dragged her onto the floor. Then, when they got to the camp, there were no beds, so they spent the night sitting in the hallway. Zhi's posts were, of course, censored. But they attracted enough attention before then that local authorities felt the need to issue a statement claiming that everything was fine and the two elderly people went voluntarily. There's been a huge backlash to sending elderly people to these camps, where in many cases there's a shortage of supplies, little medical care, and sometimes not even enough bathrooms. The backlash at least helped Zhi's relatives, who were released from the camp 2 days later after testing negative 3 times. They were lucky because it looks pretty easy to catch COVID in some of these camps. Photos spread online this week of a Shanghai office building that was converted into a quarantine camp. Not a lot of social distancing here. This is what it looks like inside. And people in the camp say the situation is not good. The makeshift hospital allegedly has no medical staff, nor medical equipment. There are no shower rooms, and even basic medication is not available. People also said that symptomatic and asymptomatic people are mixed together in the rooms, and there's not enough food and water. It's not surprising that what people in China are most afraid of isn't COVID, it's quarantine. Which is one reason this story went viral. 6 pandemic workers tried to take a 95-year-old woman to a quarantine camp, and she fought them off with a stick. When they finally got her to a quarantine camp, she allegedly jumped the wall and returned to her neighborhood, where she was seen fighting more pandemic workers. Maybe Chris should be learning Kung Fu from her. Now, I can't confirm whether the story is exactly accurate, but I can confirm that this is the Chinese Communist Party's greatest fear, that one day the Chinese antis will rise up and defeat them. Do not underestimate the antis. Now, originally, Shanghai was supposed to reach a COVID turning point this week, but it's not working. As of this recording, the official death toll in Shanghai is 25 people. Many residents have said, however, that a family member had died after catching COVID-19 since early March, but cases had not been included in official statistics. And COVID infections are rising again, even outside quarantine camps, which means even areas that are supposed to be easing up are still locking down. The Central District of Jing'an said it would no longer allow any residents out of their housing compounds, citing risks of large gatherings. That district hasn't gotten more COVID cases, they're just afraid of getting more COVID cases. The same is happening in other parts of the city. People are supposed to be allowed outside, but then they're not. But in the most bizarre move yet, entire communities in Shanghai seem to be getting relocated to, in some cases, other provinces. A notice from Communist Party officials in one Shanghai area said that residents were being moved 100 miles away to Zhejiang province, where they would have to stay for at least a week, and that only COVID-negative people would be able to go. As the BBC says, it's not clear why they're moving people who don't have COVID to another province. In other areas of Shanghai, people without COVID are being moved out of their homes so the area can be disinfected, apparently with lime powder, which makes a lot of sense. With policies like these, it's no wonder people in Shanghai are freaking out. More after the break. Welcome back. Shanghai is suffering from a weeks-long COVID lockdown, and with factories closed and the Shanghai port at a virtual standstill, this has also become a big threat to China's economy. Their solution? Stay locked down, but let key manufacturers set up production bubbles. Basically, big factories like the Tesla Gigafactory are going back into production, provided they operate in a closed loop, which means workers will be eating and sleeping on the factory floor. If you thought working from home was annoying, try homing from work. You're locked inside the factory 24 hours a day and can't go back to your apartment until the Communist Party gives you permission. Truly a worker's paradise. In Tesla's case, people are literally sleeping on the factory floor because they don't have dorms for the workers. Given there isn't any purpose-built dorm, people will be required to sleep on the floor in a designated area, and there will be other spaces allocated for showering, entertainment, both yet to be completed, and catering. Worst slumber party ever. Not that I would know what good slumber parties are like. My parents were first-generation immigrants. I grew up under permanent lockdown. Tesla is one of 666 companies that the Shanghai government has given permission to open back up in a closed-loop bubble. In China, 666 is supposed to be a lucky number for businesses. But these factory bubbles sound more like hell. And a lot of the factories are off to a slow start actually resuming work. Supply chains are complicated. With major disruptions to shipping and trucking across China, factories just can't get the parts they need. For example, Tesla workers could not resume their assembly of electric cars because they were waiting for battery packs to be delivered. So the workers are basically sitting around all day at work doing nothing. Couldn't they just stay at home doing nothing? In other cases, the factories might be able to reopen, but they don't have enough workers because they're not allowed to leave their homes yet. This whole situation sounds like a classic Communist Party solution. Announce the economy is starting back up with huge fanfare while ignoring the reality that it's not actually happening. And for those Shanghai residents still at home, they're also fed up with the extended lockdown. Like I said earlier this week, some Shanghai residents are simply refusing to take the mass COVID tests. Not so much as a political statement, but because they're scared of contracting COVID during the tests themselves. But the party has a solution to this too. They've announced that refusing or faking COVID tests can bring punishment. They say violators can be detained for up to 10 days, which sounds bad, but it's still less bad than the punishment for testing positive, which is being sent here for 2 weeks or more. You can't effectively threaten to throw people in jail when they're already basically in jail, whether it's being at a horrible quarantine camp or just locked inside their own apartment. The party solution? Threaten even more jail time. They're now saying that if someone causes an epidemic or a severe outcome, they can be put behind bars for up to 7 years. The worst part, though, is that they're also threatening to permanently demerit people's personal credit account if they refuse a COVID test. This is not your financial credit score, it's your social credit, the nationwide array of databases that track how good or bad each individual is in terms of being compliant with the Communist Party. And if you have bad social credit, you could be prevented from getting a job, renting an apartment, or even getting on public transit. You could also be blocked from ever getting a passport, meaning you'll be stuck in China forever. Now that's jail time. And it's not just Shanghai that's trying to implement the zero COVID policy. More Chinese cities are under lockdown too. Across China, some 373 million people, or a quarter of China's entire population, are under some form of movement restrictions. The city of Xi'an is one of those places. The city has been put under a partial lockdown after authorities found 43 locally transmitted infections. People are mostly required to stay within their residential compounds, and taxis are not allowed to leave the city, in case anyone tries to escape. Now, while that might seem a bit extreme over just a few dozen cases, Chinese state-run media want you to know these restrictions in Xi'an are not a lockdown, and residents feel the impact to their life is not as big as imagined. Yeah, the city is basically operating normally. Please ignore the photo we posted of a completely empty subway platform. And now it's time for me to answer a question from one of our viewers who directly supports China Uncensored, either on Patreon or Locals. Today's question comes from James Wahlberg on Patreon. Chris, Shelley, Matt, I wonder what will happen to the channel when the CCP falls. Will you report on the transition to a different kind of government? Great question, James. When the CCP falls, we are going to China to report on what's going on, provided that it's safe there after the antis rise up and overthrow the CCP. But seriously, I haven't been to China since I was a teenager, and I really hope I get to go back someday in the not-too-distant future. And after our trip to China, we're all going to take a vacation, a nice, long vacation. Thanks for your question, James. Be like James and support China Uncensored through the crowdfunding website Patreon. This is the main way we fund the show, because so much of our content gets demonetized by YouTube. And when you support us, you also get to ask us questions we might answer on the show. So check it out. The link is below. Once again, I'm Shelley Zhang, filling in this week until Chris gets back. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.